Oh, I've been practicing my meditation, Sam. What do you think?
First off, I think that's not truthful.
Welcome to the Invest Like a Boss podcast.
I'm Sam Marks.
I'm Derek Sparts.
And I'm Johnny FD. We're self-made entrepreneurs who invest our own money and use modern technology to invest like a boss.
Join us each week for exclusive interviews with our network of modern investors, business owners, and multimillionaires to discover new ways to invest our hard-earned cash.
What's up, bosses? It's episode 302 of the Invest Like a Boss podcast. I got Sam Marks on the other end, who is fresh from the forest, and he's looking fresh. How are you, Sam?
Can you take me seriously without eyebrows, honestly? Because I can't take myself seriously.
So we're actually on video. Sometimes we have internet issues and we can't use video, but it's holding up okay. And I was like, Sam looks a little different. Just there's something that, like, I know he cut his hair a while back. He's got really, really short hair now. I'm like, it's not that. I've seen him like that. Something's off. And then Sam casually mentioned, it's weird not having eyebrows. So why don't you have eyebrows, Sam?
I was forced to shave them. And this isn't some like bad college joke where you wake up without eyebrows. No, it's semi-volunteered, but I just finished a 1-month retreat in a forest. We're going to have a lot to talk about on that. I'm still digesting everything. But as part of that, lose the eyebrows, lose the hair, buddy. Losing the hair wasn't a big deal. I don't have that much to begin with.
You're already halfway there.
And I've been kind of preparing for it by shaving my head. But the eyebrows was difficult. These things take 4 months to grow back, dude.
4 months. How can our hair grow like so fast, and then the eyebrows are just like, nah, I'm gonna take my time on this one?
Yeah. Well, let's be honest, Derek. As we get older, the eyebrows aren't what they used to be either. So what's the rush?
Mine seem to be on a growth surge lately. They're getting bushier than ever.
Bushier. Trimming, maintenance. I'll tell you, the late 30s requires a lot of maintenance compared to the mid 30s, especially the early 30s.
Sam and I are the same age, and I think we've both realized in the last couple of years that, wait, we're not like super young anymore. Things are changing.
I feel like we were like peaking a few years ago, and that peak would somehow last for the rest of my life, but it didn't. And this year, I feel like there's been a significant step down in like bodily function, hair growth, muscle mass, all types of things.
I always saw people and I was like, wow, they really let themselves go. And people are like, oh, it's so much harder to lose weight or stay in shape or blah, blah. I'm like, nah, they just got lazy. Now I'm like, okay, I could still stay in shape, but wow, you got to do a lot more to stay in shape.
Well, man, I'm impressed with you. You're still training for marathons. I can barely sit cross-legged for 5 minutes without my knee tearing a meniscus.
Yeah, it's just the recovery time takes a whole lot more. And then you really got to watch what you're eating too. And I'm like, man, I could have just crushed a whole pizza after this. Now I'm like, oh, maybe I should have a salad.
You know, when it really settled in for me, it was about 2 months ago. And, I had just gone through this kind of 6 months, probably 8 months of like knee rehab because I tore my meniscus, and I did stem cells twice, and I basically didn't move much for 3 months. And then I did like rehab for 3 months, and it was just starting to feel like almost, I don't want to say 100%, but it was feeling good again for like exercise and everything. And then little old Sam just went and to sit down in a normal sedan car. And when I went to sit in, I just twisted slightly on it, and I just felt this grin missing, like kind of tear feeling.
Oh, I know what that feels like. Followed
by this pain, and there it goes. 1 month basically, I couldn't walk again, and went and got a new MRI on my knee, and there's a new tear in my knee. And I'm just like, wow, dude, I just sat in a car. That's how injury prone it is.
Yeah, I thought you were going to be like, oh, so I was feeling good and I hopped on a skateboard. But no, you're like, I just sat down in a car.
I just sat down. So that was when it really, like, the truth settled in. Like, this is going to be a downhill battle from here on out.
So Sam and I are in the same place. Training our body isn't exactly easy anymore. But Sam might have found a hack lately to training the mind, which brings us to our guest this week, Kadam Morten. Why don't you give the audience a quick introduction to who this guy is? Because you've been super hyped on this. This is recorded, I don't know, but maybe a little bit before you went on your journey. And you were like, oh my God, I'm so excited. I got to talk to this guy. You were really hyped about it. And I felt like I should have known who he is. I really didn't though. So why don't you explain to the audience?
Oh, Kadam Morten is the man. But to answer your question, specifically, he's the U.S. National Spiritual Director and the resident teacher of Kadampa Meditation, New York. Now, Kadampa it's based off of a Tibetan spiritual tradition of Mahayana Buddhism. It's so funny how I found this, Derek, because it was right when I moved to Barcelona. I remember a couple of years back, and I basically randomly picked this place to live because I was so tired of looking for a place for like 2 or 3 months. And I finally just like surrendered. And then I just ended up getting a place in a totally different side of town.
And that's the condo you're in now, right?
Yeah. I just woke up one day. I'm like, I'm done looking, like, whatever, give me X.
Yeah.
And move-ins and all that stuff and all the post-COVID drama and a lot of things happening at that time. And like 200 feet away, you still haven't been to my place in Barcelona, have you?
No,
Derek?
you did a walkthrough and it looks awesome. Yeah.
Ah, okay. So yeah, you'll see when you come visit, hopefully soon. They have a center that's literally just 200 feet right across the street, basically, from me. And I stumbled upon it one day, and it said meditate in Barcelona, and I walked in, and that's kind of how it all started. And I was kind of looking to get on to this path of, or a path, spiritual path of some sort. And through this center, I got kind of introduced to the teaching of Kadam Morten, who's the resident teacher in New York, and just basically started following him via Zoom and recorded audios. And my gosh, it's just like from day one, just started learning so much and really identifying with the teaching. So it's been amazing. I've been part of it for probably a year and a half now in a weekly study course, and then some just through literature and self-study. But this stuff is really awesome, man. It's really awesome.
So some might say, even Kadam Morten, I think, brought it up, that this could have been fate that you actually moved to where you did and found the center. Now, if you're new to the iLab podcast, Sam is like gone through some things that he's been pretty public on the podcast in the last few years. And I feel like you're like pulling out of it. And it's definitely due to all this stuff that you've been studying. And I think a big chunk of this and why you're excited to talk to Kadam Morten is because you're feeling so much better. I don't know how much you want to say about that. And I think you are. I don't want to speak for you. But I know that we've noticed on the podcast that like Sam has been more Sam again, and it's cool.
Yeah. Thanks, man. That's great. I love the reflection and feedback. Well, why I think this is important for everybody and myself included in that is, well, if we rewind, we previously did an episode called Happy Money, episode 126, if you go back a ways. And it was surprisingly, it was one of our most popular episodes. It just went into our relationship with money, and basically, if we're not happy with ourselves or we don't have a good relationship with money, every time we go spend money, whether it's for a cheeseburger or a coffee or donating money or paying an electrical bill, if we have a bad relationship with money, you're never going to be happy no matter how much money you have. You'd probably even be worse off, right? Because every time you spend money, you feel bad. And when you have more money, you tend to do more things and spend more money, right? So it was really about getting to the fundamental relationship with ourselves and money. And this episode, we're talking about Lojong, it's very, very similar, but it's just our relationship to our mind and being mindful of our state of mind, and particularly in a Western culture and society. Whereas Westerners we're generally wired to pursue happiness outside ourselves in the world, right? Now, as practitioners of some of the Eastern traditions, they would argue, better to take an opposite approach, actually. Knowing, say, the mind is the most powerful force in the world, it's much better to spend your time focusing on developing your mind, how to work with your mind, how to abide in a state of happiness, and how to develop happy minds within us. And fortunately, Lojong has a manuscript for actually doing that. Now, what's the correct approach for most Westerners, or most of us anyways? Well, it's different for everybody, but for most of us, it's probably somewhere in between. Like if we're 100% on, pursuing happiness outside, and we're not putting any time into thinking about mindfulness or how to train our mind, well, that's probably too far in one direction, right? So I think, the beauty of this teaching and this tradition is that hopefully it can bring a little bit more of a balance, or a little bit more mindfulness to to everybody's day.
And that's a good point. I think as you'll hear in the interview, Kadam Morten is actually based in New York City. So you can't get any more center of the hub of Western culture than New York City. You'll actually probably hear a siren or two in the background, which is very reminiscent of Manhattan. So I think it's kind of an interesting dichotomy that we have this very spiritual teacher doing the Lojong practice, as you had mentioned, Sam, and he's in the hub of like insanity of the world. So yes. It's actually really perfect and I think we should jump into this interview, and I know we got a lot of stuff to cover afterwards. So before we do that, let's listen to Sam and Kadam Morten on Invest Like a Boss. Hey bosses, we're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. The show will be right back.
Kadam Morten, it's a pleasure and a delight to have you on the show.
It's a pleasure and a delight to be here, Sam. Thank you very much.
Been looking forward to this for a very long time. Invest Like a Boss, we call it iLab, is primarily a business and investing podcast, but we love to go and discuss and theorize and debate how money and external pursuits are related or not related to happiness, because ultimately, at the end of the day, we say, everything that we talk about investing, et cetera, it all is pointing to the end goal of trying to achieve and optimize happiness. And I know you reside in New York most of the year, so you're right there in the heart of external pursuits of reputation and money and everything else. So I know you have so much to say on the topic. I wanted to start, I think I've heard this story before, but I'm very interested to go back to when you originally got interested in some of these traditions. I think, specifically we'll try to talk about Lojong mind training on this episode, and how that related to when you originally met Geshe Kelsang.
So essentially, we'll have to go back a little bit in time because I met Geshe Kelsang Gyato, my teacher, and this particular meditation practice, Buddhist meditation practice, back when I was 18, which is now a while ago. So this is back in 1981 when I went to university in the north of England in a city called York University. Basically, when I was 16 years old, my father passed away from cancer. And that obviously brought about quite a change in circumstances, but also it essentially caused me to ask a bunch of questions about what the heck is going on, and where can I find, we might say, some stability in my life? Because obviously that produced quite a bit of anxiety and just confusion, really. I think when you're 16 anyway, you're confused. But when you sort of throw such a kind of intense situation upon a young person, it produces a lot of extra questioning, really. And so in my case, I was very much drawn towards thinking about, well, how can I develop my mind? How can I, and the practice of meditation was sort of the obvious place to start. So I sought out a local class, and it just so happened that was in a center that Geshe Kelsang himself had set up just a few years before. It's actually the first center that he established outside of the center where he was living. And I can clearly remember that for me, the key kind of initial point that really struck me when the teacher was explaining a little bit about what we were going to be looking at was the fact that everybody experiences unhappiness. Everybody experiences confusion. Everybody experiences suffering. And to me, that came across as a bit of a relief, because especially when you're a young person, you're sort of so caught up in your own perspective. I didn't recognize that what I had experienced was, in a sense, something that's universal. Everybody's going to have to experience loss. Everyone's going to encounter grief. Everyone's going to encounter confusion. And fundamentally, there is a lot of confusion in people's lives about the big questions. Where do we find happiness? How do we find freedom from unhappiness? And I guess, how do we learn to navigate our own minds? Because one of the things that Buddha's teachings point out to us is that our suffering, our unhappiness, our agitation isn't directly coming from the external situation, but rather from how we respond to that external situation. So in other words, it's actually coming from our mind. So there was that. It's like actually the problem is here, not out there. And if you begin to practice training the mind, as you were just mentioning, if you begin to start learning about your mind, learning what are the states of mind that produce agitation and unhappiness, and what are the states of mind that produce happiness, well, now you're given the tools to start actively training your mind and letting go of what's producing your own suffering, and in becoming more familiar with those states of mind that produce happiness.
And when did you originally meet Geshe Kelsang? Was that something you just, I mean, obviously you would take that as some type of positive karma, right? That you were able to meet him at such a young age?
Yeah. I mean, in hindsight, I wasn't really, in hindsight, yes, I can say that was incredible, great, good fortune at the time. You're just somewhat taking it for granted, But yeah, so my first teacher was a close student of Geshe Kelsang's, and he was a Buddhist monk. And then he invited Geshe Kelsang to come to that center, which was just a very small center meeting in the city of York. And I had the great good fortune to meet him. And literally from the very first time I met him, because he heard I was studying at university, he said, "You should also study here." And he encouraged me to actually study. And he actually said, take exams and become qualified to teach, all of which seemed like, what are you talking about? I had no conception of that, but it seemed he did, because all of that is essentially what came to pass.
That's great stuff. Well, I read my first book by Geshe Kelsang going back a few years ago. I pretty randomly moved to Barcelona, and I was going through a very, very confused time in my life, and of course looking for all the answers, seeking not finding, and 200 feet away from my new place in Barcelona was a Kadampa Meditation Center. So I popped in there and I started going to to learn how to meditate. And I started going to they have one class in English, and it was a little rough. He was kind of learning English and I was kind of trying to learn Spanish. But at that point, I was already hooked, because I had finished a book by Geshe Kelsang, and I'm like, I need to emerge or submerge into this. And that's when they recommended to kind of join the general program through the New York City branch.
Oh, really?
And yeah, it's been nonstop since then for me. One of the messages in that book, and I'll just read it here, is that really caught me was, all the happiness there is in the world arises from wishing others to be happy, and all the suffering there is in the world arises from wishing ourselves to be happy. And I think that that hit home for sure, because I was going through this deep pattern of pursuit and just kind of continuously being dissatisfied with the outcome. And, I don't think that narrative in itself is that unique in the world. You can find that through other sages and spiritual traditions of the past. But for me, what it was figuring, okay, it's like one thing to feel this and nod your head and agree with it. It's another thing to wake up tomorrow and have it fully implemented. I mean, it's miles and miles apart. And you need some type of manuscript, and you need long duration practice, it seems. And, the book that we're reading now in the foundation program, for me, that's as good of a manuscript as you can find anywhere. And when I picked up that one, we read that book quite slowly in the foundation program, but I'm just so amazed that book exists and how it's not included in like the top 100 reading list before you die. Like I don't see that anywhere, which amazes me, but I also realize I think it's an opportunity for so many people, to grow. So these traditions, Kadam, as far as we're aware, they were pretty much orally transmitted early on for several hundred years after Buddha Shakyamuni. Is that what we understand of it?
Yeah, we talk about a lineage of scripture, of texts, right? And then we talk about a lineage of experience. They were written down, but especially there were certain practices, including what we call the Lojong practices. That's the Tibetan phrase for it. Just means training the mind, the training the mind practices. They were actually transmitted in secret for quite a while, meaning just orally. You could find references to it in the text, but the sort of the full exposition of it, the sort of elaboration on the methodology as you just expressed, like the sort of mapping of it, of like how to go from essentially a self-centered state where basically you're consumed by yourself, always thinking about everything from your self-centered perspective, basically going, what about me, all the time, to really learning how to open your heart to others fully, to experience a mind that is cherishing others, basically abiding in a state of love. That's a big journey, as you just pointed out. And what's so beautiful about the training the mind tradition is that it is mapped out in terms of stages. First we need to recognize that each one of us has the potential for happiness naturally within our mind. And I think already there, that's like a huge piece of information, which is crucially missing from within our society, that there is a natural source of peace and happiness in our heart, in our mind. We say in our heart because it has to do with learning how to let your mind become more still. That's where the practice of meditation is really crucial, because especially in our society, we're just encouraged to always be like thinking about things, scheming about things. And even when it comes to looking at mental health and so on, we're thinking about it as opposed to learning, well, actually, there's a methodology for maybe just allowing your mind to become more still. And when it does, you, in a sense, begin to get out of your head, out of your overly conceptual way of being, into a more heart-centered experience. And within that heart-centered experience, what we discover is, there's actually a natural source of peace here. There's a natural source of happiness. So that's huge, because that in a sense is inverting our whole general approach to life, which is acquisition. Get a hold of this, whether it be experiences or possessions or reputation or people. It's about going out and accumulating what we perceive to be the causes of happiness. But as I'm sure the folks who tune into your podcast are aware, just amassing external conditions is not necessarily going to produce the thing everyone's actually looking for, which is inner peace and happiness. You can be on the most beautiful vacation spot, but if your mind isn't peaceful and happy, you can have a terrible time. And on the other hand, you can be in a very seemingly, situation that isn't particularly beautiful, but your mind is happy. So in and of itself, that's teaching us we need to include, at least in how we go about trying to find stability and peace and happiness in our life, we need to include finding that access point into a peaceful mind, and then beginning to nurture that internal experience of peace and happiness. So that's like step number one, because then you're recognizing, I have a source of peace and happiness within me. So I want to start tuning into that. So what is the best way to begin to nurture that? Well, there's a bunch of different suggested ways of being and thinking, but it does eventually lead to what you're talking about, which is the recognition that we might say that there are a bunch of minds that when we experience them, they're actually in alignment with that source of peace. And then there's a bunch of minds that when we experience them, they're not in alignment with that source of peace. In fact, they are agitated. And because they're agitated, they bring with them a sense of distortion. So within the Buddhist psychological, exposition, they're called delusions, deluded states of mind, because they're agitated and they distort our perception. So a mind of love is actually a peaceful mind. When we're experiencing, we might have, we kind of have to say here, authentic love. Yeah. Because of course, sometimes there's, often within our experience of love, there's also a lot of grasping at the object of love, at which point there's that sort of acquisitional thing going on. I want this, I need this, I love you, I need you for my happiness. Whereas when we're in an authentic experience of love, we're actually connecting to that other person and we're just appreciating them and we're wanting them to be happy. And that experience is fully in alignment with that natural source of peace and happiness. And so that's why it turns out that if you want to be authentically happy, we have to lessen that self-concern and begin to open our hearts to others. And again, we kind of do that step by step.
Mm-hmm. I mean, where we're at in the book now, and I haven't read ahead, although I do memorize the condensed meaning, so I have an idea. I think the first part for me, really, where I was able to walk out in the streets and realize my mind's starting to change, is just in our relationship to other people and how we view other people. And you realize how many of the agitated thoughts of your mind each day arise from interactions with other people, judgments of other people.
Sure.
And that, I mean, that's been a year of practice. And of course, it's still not perfect, but it's gotten a lot better. And the chapter we're in now, transforming adverse conditions, is like, because then you go into your day and you realize everything is an adverse condition. I think in an ordinary day, we're just so used to that being an ordinary day. But if you actually sat and wrote it down, there's like probably 20 to 100 adverse conditions that you have to kind of navigate in a day, and keeping that state of and being able to turn those into peaceful states of mind. Well, I mean, I'm not able to do it fully yet, but I can imagine if you were able to do that, what a incredibly blissful and incredible mental state in life that you would have. So I'm looking forward to seeing what else there is to learn. But just those two pieces alone, I mean, we've been studying in the foundation program now for about, I think, over a year now. But those two chapters are enough to chew on for the rest of a life.
For sure. I mean, if you take like just a simple example of, say, standing in a line, when you're just wanting to purchase your groceries or something like that. Mm-hmm. And, there could be that situation where the person in front of you just doesn't have the right change or whatever it may be. And so there's like a delay. And it's just one very simple example, like you say, like you can point to kind of countless, very small, and that examples of adverse conditions. But depending upon what's going on in your mind at that moment, you're in a sense of urgency for whatever reason, that can actually seem like a major thing. And you start thinking, what's wrong with this person? Why didn't they think about this in advance? And so forth like that. So you start creating out of what is a very kind of normal everyday situation, an adverse condition, a problem. You have a problem now. But if you think about where the problem is coming from, it is coming precisely from the fact that right now, there's only one person that we're really worried about. And that would be me. I have an agenda to just quickly go through this purchasing situation. And I was expecting it to go much more smoothly, and it's not. What about me? And all the pain is coming from that. What about me? And so one of the, we might say, mental tricks we're learning, which is not a trick insofar as it's unbelievably profound, but it's just that recognition, I can move my mind to the person in front of me or the person in front of them who's also being forced to wait, and think, wait a moment, they are exactly like me. They want to be happy. They want to be free from suffering. They don't want to have any hassles. And I know what they're going through. So that instead of me being self-concerned, I open my mind and start connecting to them and feeling some empathy, some compassion. Or I can think about this person who's whatever, causing a delay. And also recognize, they want to be happy. They don't want to suffer. And now you're taking a situation that at the moment just feels bad. It's not a major catastrophe, obviously, but these are actually the situations we're encouraged to start training with, the whole kind of small stuff thing, like if you can start mastering the ability to stay peaceful and happy with these like small inconveniences, well, then we're preparing ourselves for when more major stuff happens. But anyway, the point being here is that we have this expression in the Lojong teaching Geshe Kelsang uses, walk down the mountain of self and up the mountain of other. Basically, just switch your perspective, see things from the other person's perspective. And now instead of hanging out in an unhappy mind, what about me, self-centered mind, you're in an open-hearted mind. You're actually training in kindness, in patience, in compassion, in love. And now you've got this excellent situation where you're going, I need to train in Lojong. I need to train in training the mind. And look, this person this situation is giving me the perfect situation to do that. So you can do that at a stoplight. You can do that, at work when somehow the meeting isn't going according to the way you wanted it to go. I mean, as you mentioned, there are endless adverse conditions. For some people, just the alarm clock in the morning is an adverse condition. Just the thought of getting out of bed is an adverse condition for some people, And, it's not really for us to decide, well, that's not an adverse condition, because it is to them.
Mm-hmm.
But the real adverse condition is not the external condition. The real adversity is actually coming from that state of mind, the self-centered state of mind. We call it the self-cherishing mind, the mind that cherishes myself as being more important than others. I'm the most important person here. Of all these people in the line, what about me? I had to catch an EasyJet flight the other day, and I don't know if
you're not flying at least Ryanair, Kadam Morten.
Yeah, exactly. What happened to be, it depends sometimes on which place your destination is, what your destination is. But in this case, EasyJet, they don't, it's all open. So you just go in and everybody has to find their seat,
Yeah.
And it's one of those situations you could be just thinking, oh, I've got to get in there. I've got to get the nice seat. I need to get the window seat. At which point the whole thing becomes painful. But the pain isn't coming from EasyJet. The pain is always just coming from our own mind. And if we start to be able to just think, oh, I hope everybody else here finds the seat they want. And now you're in this lovely, lovely space in your own mind, and you're enjoying the whole thing, because the whole trip to whatever country you happen to be flying to is actually a trip of boosting all the positive energies in your mind. And it becomes a happiness journey instead of an unhappiness journey. And eventually we can learn to do that in every situation, even the ones that seem very, very difficult at the moment.
Oh, it's so much to apply with air travel. I mean, that's just, everyone needs some type of practice these days going on an airplane. And that was one of the first places I remember, what would be a very stressful situation for me normally. And I remember getting on the plane and it's crammed and people are talking on speaker phones and someone's watching a movie on their phone, like a seat behind me. And there's kids running up and down the aisles. And I'm like, you know what? Without all these people, I cannot fly to this destination right now. I think I was going to see my parents. Right. I'm like, thank you all for all these people, because without them, this plane's not going anywhere. Right. Without the customer man. So because of them, I'm actually able to do this trip. And it was like a trick, and it turned everything. And then all of a sudden I'm like, I had this sensation of wanting to get up and ask the stewardess if I could even just thank everybody on the plane for that, because I knew everybody on that plane was also feeling that same stress and just land this thing. I want to be done with it, But it can turn something like that into positive experience, of course.
Well, and the contemplation you're referring to there is called the meditation on kindness, right? When you actually recognize that whatever situation you're in could not happen without the kindness of many, many people. And so this is one of the contemplations that we're encouraged to do. So, for example, you can literally do it with anything, like this chair I'm sitting on at the moment. Maybe I can complain about the chair to myself and think, oh, well, it's not as comfortable as I would like it to be, or whatever the case may be. Or in which case, again, I'm just worrying about me. Or I can realize how lucky I am to have a chair. And all the people who were involved in creating this chair, without which I wouldn't have a chair. And so this contemplation goes across the board. When you think about the food that you eat, how many people are involved in bringing you that food? In New York City, to get from one side of Manhattan to the other, you take the subway or you take a bus. Billions of people literally are involved in creating the trains, the roads, the infrastructure that would enable the maintenance of this. Yeah. Let alone, the money that is required and so forth, coming from throughout the world and so on. And just to recognize this then takes it beyond, just dealing with a kind of individual situation. It takes us into some very, very deep, profound places, because we start recognizing, as, Buddha kind of points out, that we are entirely interdependent beings. whenever we're caught up in that self-centered mind, we're walking around going, what about me? In that moment, we're relating to ourselves as a independent person, a self-made person who doesn't need others, who's just kind of caught up in our own self-centered perspective. Whereas Buddha points out that everything that exists only exists in dependence upon other things. And kindly, at some point, independence upon all other things. It's an interdependent network. And so when we start applying that meditation that you just pointed out, which is just recognizing, this person who perhaps is your client, you might think, I don't like this person, this person, I find this person annoying, but we need to recognize, actually, this person is being kind to me because they're enabling me to do whatever job I'm doing. Yeah. How kind, And then it's kind of like at a deeper level in terms of the training the mind. They're also being kind to me because they're annoying. I'm perceiving them as annoying. Yeah. And if I want to improve my ability to train my mind, I actually need the challenges that we encounter on a daily basis. And to me, this is like a really important point. I think important for everybody, that essentially, we want to be living life, we might say at two levels. There's the stuff that we take responsibility for doing every day in terms of ourself, our family, our businesses, our various interactions we have with others. Yeah, that's, in other words, sort of the bringing together of the various resources we need in order to have a good life and to look after the people we want to look after and so forth. That's like at one level. But we also want to have, we might say, an internal mission, mission possible, which is making sure that we are engaged in training our mind, that we are actually moving forward, not towards just the fulfillment of our external goals, but of our internal, which is finally our kind of primary goal. We're looking to be able to be authentically happy, to find real peace and fulfillment through nurturing those peaceful, positive states that are in the nature of that peace and fulfillment: kindness, compassion, wisdom, love. And every single day in our life will always provide us with opportunities to do that. Some days things go according to plan, rarely, but some days things go according to plan. That's great. We enjoy those, and we hopefully use those as well to then kind of share our happiness, our joy with others around us. Some days things don't go according to plan. So maybe on the external development, things aren't going quite the way we wanted them to. But on the internal development, that's a great day. It's a challenging day, but those are the days that we can really learn from. I think all of us have probably been through, I'm more or less guaranteed, everyone's been through tough times. Everyone has encountered crises in their life. And if we do manage to somewhat successfully navigate that particular crisis, at a certain point, we're able to look back at that crisis and go, actually, that was a tough time, but it was a meaningful time. It was actually a good time from that perspective, because I learned from it. I grew from it.
I think I heard you say once, for a Dharma practitioner, there's really not good or bad events. Things are just good. Things are just part of the path. And I was standing in a bad airport line at that time, and I was like, wow, that really just, if I can just remember that all the time, remember to take everything as a teacher without a preference to a degree. Yeah, that would be a pretty incredible state to abide on. It reminds me, I had the good luck to run into a Buddhist monk at an airport once. It was he resided in a forest in Thailand. And at that point, I remember seeing, you see photos of Tibetan monks on these alpine, crisp air mountains. And then, of course, you can imagine a Thai forest in the subtropics of Thailand, and mosquitoes, hot year round, snakes, spiders, etc. And I was having a very open, good conversation with him. So I asked, why did you choose a forest in Thailand compared to a pristine mountaintop in the Himalayas? He said, a 5-star hotel is good for comfort, but bad for patience, bad for practice. And it's the same with this. If you go to a pristine mountaintop He's like, there's lots of stories of monks that have gone up there 6 month, a year retreat, had everything very relatively easy, come back down into the city and are not able to control their emotions because they haven't had the daily adverse conditions to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
In your experience, we kind of there's various parts of the practice. Part of it is intellectualizing some of the text, which for me, that was like the initial draw. I was like, wow, this stuff is so just packed with wisdom and deep. I didn't know how to go in and apply it or practice in a daily life. How do you see the balance of meditation, intellectualizing and understanding the text and teachings, and practicing in adverse conditions, or in a sense, almost throwing yourself into the hornet's nest?
Sure. Yeah, very, very good question. Meditation performs different functions, and within the Buddhist tradition. So, this particular Buddhist tradition that I practice in and have the good fortune to teach in, that comes from Geshe Kelsang, is called Kadampa Buddhism. A Kadampa, if you were to kind of etymologize that Tibetan phrase, but it basically means a person who is practicing the stages of the path, the stages of the path to mental transformation, ultimately towards the final goal, we might say, of enlightenment. So the stages of the path, person who practices the stages of the path. And many of those stages are articulated as contemplations. The meditation that many people are familiar with, a simple breathing meditation where you just focus on like one thing, or watching the mind meditation or something. You just focus on one thing so as to allow your mind to settle into a somewhat more peaceful state. That meditation is actually regarded just as a foundation meditation, a preliminary. It's very important though, because from that experience, we're beginning to recognize, I do have a source of peace and happiness in my own heart. So that means I do have the potential to be peaceful and happy. Fantastic. What I want to do is nurture that potential by visiting there often. And so what we're given in the stages of the path meditations is a series of contemplations, for example, the aforementioned kindness meditation, but a series of contemplations that essentially are investigations of life and the various situations we encounter in life. For example, the first meditation is one would meditate on one's good fortune in having a human life like we have, a life that has sufficient resources, and in particular, the opportunity to recognize where your happiness comes from and train in it so that you actually feel, I am fortunate in my life. It's so important for people to regularly access that understanding. Every now and then we might do it. We'd read a Facebook meme or something like that, and we kind of go, I'm fortunate. But you want to actually do it regularly in contemplation. So the purpose of that meditation is to contemplate that until you have an insight, until it touches you in the heart. So it's not just an intellectualizing, but rather you're using the contemplation on a particular piece of logic, piece of wisdom, until it touches your heart. And when it touches your heart, now you have an object of meditation, which means at that point, instead of like you focus on the breath, in this case, we're focusing on that insight. We're focusing on that kind of heart-opening experience of like, I am incredibly fortunate, and I want to make sure I don't waste this opportunity, that I take full advantage of it. And then you just sit with that very energizing insight in your heart. So if you become familiar with that, and as a little side note here, the actual translation of the word that we normally translate as meditation, which in Tibetan is gom, actually literally means to familiarize. So when you're meditating, you're familiarizing your mind with a cause of happiness. So in this case, that wish to take full advantage of the fortunate circumstances of your life is a cause of happiness. So you're familiarizing your mind with this new insight. And as you become more familiar with it in meditation, it begins to spill over into how you see yourself and how you see others and how you see your life in general. So you find yourself approaching your life from a much more positive perspective. Basically, if you start your day by connecting to that thought, it's going to be a day, basically a good day, because you're going to be approaching that day from this open-hearted, determined perspective, determined to really take full advantage of your life. And so that's the key, that basically you want to see your life, the various circumstances in your life, as a part of that process of training the mind. So for us, there isn't really like a separation. It's not like, well, do so and so and so much meditation and then so much living. Just start the process basically as much as you can in the circumstances of your life, whereby you try to make sure you touch a little bit to that peaceful heart every day. And if you can, over time, if you're kind of more interested in following through, connecting it to some wisdom perspective that will energize you to bring this experience of peace and kindness and love and compassion and wisdom with you into your life. Because then you will be living on those two levels. Yeah, you're doing your stuff, but you're also constantly on an internal journey. You're like on a spiritual journey, of nurturing your potential. And your life will feel very, very meaningful. Not just necessarily successful or not successful, as the case may be, right? But it'll feel meaningful because you will feel like you are drawing closer to being the person you want to be and towards finding that authentic happiness and fulfillment, which in turn will also enable you, obviously, to be a much better friend, parent, son, daughter, so forth, colleague, boss. Exactly. Yeah.
I'm sure you've met such a wide variety of people through the center, but also just living in New York.
That's true.
That's
true.
Don't say that lightly.
They don't have that expression only in New York for no reason.
Yeah, right. I mean, what's your experience with people who kind of start to get, they hear the narrative, they're interested. There's got to be a lot of people in New York, and sorry for generalizing this, that are just thinking, this all sounds great. Yeah, I want to train my mind, but I'm going to wait until I make partner in the law firm or exit this business. I'll look into it in 15, 20 years. I'll think about it in retirement. What's your message to them in terms of trying to delay and fully focus on the external?
Sure. It's hard to generalize in a sense, and because everyone is going to have their own relationship to the teachings. And I very much feel that my job is to simply present the teachings and allow people to relate to them at whatever level they want to. And so, for many people, they will develop a relationship, or maybe some people that only come once or twice. I mean, I remember once just standing on a street in Brooklyn, and a person came up and tapped me on the shoulder, and they said, "Oh, are you Kadam Morten?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, I just want you to know, I went to one of your teachings 10 years ago, and I haven't been back, but I've never forgotten it." And that was like, oh, wow, okay. In other words, I never know what people are doing. I mean, I do if someone comes up and talks to me later and relates it to me, but I have many, many people who come to classes. Some return intermittently, some really get deeply involved and maybe even trained to start teaching themselves and so forth. And some people, they just come and go, but that doesn't mean that wasn't a successful interaction. And I know that from Geshe Kelsang's perspective, anybody who comes in and makes a connection, even however brief, that is something very, very meaningful. Yeah. Because that seeds have been sown in their mind, so to speak. And you don't know when those seeds are going to start ripening. So from my point of view, I just encourage people, obviously, to think about it and reflect on it. And I've seen so many situations of people who come, and they maybe come for 2-3 weeks, and then they kind of disappear because maybe they had some specific issue that was on their mind, and they kind of like needed a reminder. They needed some positive energy. And then they kind of work through that situation, and they don't necessarily feel that urgency to return. But then maybe some months go by and suddenly things are arising again. Often people will say, I really feel like I like when I come back, it's a kind of reminder, I should have been coming all along. And then of course, they're just working with life like everybody. Yeah. But then sometimes, and this is, this is just in some cases, at some point, things really start rolling internally for them. And because it takes time, it's very deep stuff. And everyone's getting so many influences, especially these days with YouTube and, Instagram. And like, we're being inundated with all these various things sort of sucking our attention.
Don't forget the swiping, Kadam Morten. A lot of swiping going on.
Oh, there's a lot of swiping. There's a lot of this going on all the time. Exactly. And I sort of realized, well, and what our center is presenting and these teachings are really just one of those influences, But I mean, in Buddhism, we would say if they have the karma's there and circumstances are sort of like conspiring to create an openness for them, then they'll find that they'll naturally be drawn and want to go deeper and deeper in. And I think, one of the really beautiful things about this is that, this is an ancient tradition. As we sort of mentioned a little bit at the beginning, this goes all the way back to Buddha, and it is an oral transmission, which means it was transmitted from teacher to student, who in turn, they took it to heart, they practiced it, and they realized it. So, and then they became a teacher and transmitted it to their students down through the ages, all the way to, our present teacher, Geshe Kelsang, who's now transmitting it to us in the modern world, because we have centers throughout the world. In the modern world, we call it modern Buddhism because it's in a sense presented by Geshe Kelsang in such a way as to allow it to be accessible to people regardless of background, regardless of cultural affiliation and so forth, to be accessible to people in the modern world. So, but it's living, and it's open to transmutation because it's not about a particular story. It's not about a particular affiliation with any geographical location in the world. It's about the human psychology. It's about the mind. And so anybody can relate to it. Anyway, the point I'm making about the ancient quality of it is that it's tried and tested. The stuff works. And so if you get to that point where you feel like, I would like to stabilize this experience, then, hey, the door's open, If you just want to pop in and out and get that boost every now and then, that's great too. So it's open to everybody.
Beautifully said. I'm going to hit you with two quick questions in closing. These are pretty deep, Kadam Morten. I know you've been asked a lot of deep questions throughout your career. Is this a career?
It's not what one would really normally see as a career, but
tenure. I don't know the word.
I guess it's certainly what I've ended up doing, and I feel very, very fortunate to have this opportunity. Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of us feel very fortunate that you're sitting where you are and teaching what you are. So one question is, it's scratching a niche of mine. So as we change our mind, as we change the quality of our mind, we certainly change our perspective of the world around us. But do you think that the world around us actually will change as we change the quality of our mind in terms of the actual physical objects and events that happen in our life?
Okay, that is a deep question because there's an implicit presumption within the question that there is a fixed objective reality outside of the mind. Whereas kind of at the heart of Buddhist practice, at the heart of Buddha's insight, is that the world that you experience is a reflection of your mind. So at its most simplest, when you're angry, especially take the travel example that we've brought up. And, sometimes, especially if you're jet lagged, and you're tired, you didn't sleep well on that flight and so on, and your sleep patterns, you can become hypersensitive to sounds and noises and that kind of stuff. And your mind can have this underlying irritability. And at that point, everybody is unattractive. Every situation, you're just like, it's an overwhelming situation. It's not that the situation is overwhelming from its own side. It's just that you're in a fragile, and in this case, agitated and perhaps angry state of mind that's creating this painful reality. If you're in a peaceful, loving state, everything looks gorgeous and beautiful, and we've all had those experiences. So the answer is that in terms of your subjective experience, as you begin to stabilize peace and kindness, being less judgmental, being more open and loving. Generally speaking, every facet of your experience of the world will change. Maybe areas that to you, buildings or whatever, that did not look attractive, everything will start looking attractive to you. Not in a kind of, I need that, but just simply because your mind is more open to seeing things in a beautiful way. You'll start feeling close to people, whoever they are. And you'll be kindly disposed towards people, and you'll find that suddenly people are kindly disposed towards you. And so your relationships will improve. Basically, on all levels, yes, your experience of reality will change. Will that suddenly, solve the Middle East or whatever? Not initially in terms of what's known to be going on, but even in terms of how you're experiencing it, because you will be seeing it as opportunities for training and compassion, opportunities for deepening your wisdom. Like even the news will become like a teaching, Yeah. And so, I just imagine if we had lots and lots of people who were bringing that type of sense of possibility and positivity and beauty really around us in the world, that will begin to impact things on a kind of noticeably grand scale. But for you subjectively, as you change your mind, you do change your world.
Yeah. And I think this is one, we did the chapter on wishing love. How this became so manifest and powerful for me was thinking about all the world problems and thinking, well, if you could actually wish that all people were able to change their minds, their hearts, and have the spiritual progress, then collectively there could be, you could, in a sense, theoretically solve all the world problems, because all these world problems are born in the human heart. So as long as the majority of human hearts are unpurified, then we're going to continue to have the same problems that the world's always had, in a sense.
Absolutely.
So Kadam, final question. How do you define a meaningful life?
How do I find a meaningful life? I would say it's a life in which we are recognizing our potential. So from my perspective, that would mean my potential to become a better person on many, many levels, my potential to increase my quality of peace, love, wisdom, compassion, and, not to get too transcendental, but the more that we spend time exploring the nature of the mind, which is essentially what one does, we spend a lot of time investigating, well, what is the mind? We start discovering that the mind is the most powerful tool there is.
Yeah.
The mind has shaped everything, created everything, and even on a sort of very directly understandable basis, it is creating your world. Your mind is creating your world, because your mind is creating your experience of your world, and your experience of your world is your world. So what we discover when we explore the mind is that the mind doesn't really have a boundary. It doesn't really have limits. We walk around feeling I'm a limited person. I'm stuck in my difficult past. I'm stuck in my worries about the future and my conflicted relationships. I'm a person who can't change. I'm anxious. I'm insecure, whatever it may be. We've all got our own little idea of who we are, but that we kind of feel trapped in. So the more that we connect to the nature of the mind, we begin to realize, well, actually, I'm not intrinsically trapped. I don't have to identify in this way with my limitations. I can actually start identifying with my potential that we experience in meditation, with this, in a sense, vast possibility that exists for change and transformation. So if we learn to begin to key into our potential and to recognize it and start identifying with it, and then just every day as best we can, we're doing our best to nurture our potential so that we have this feeling of progress.
Yeah.
Maybe externally things are progressing, maybe not, but internally they definitely will be progressing. So that's a meaningful life. And in terms of how you're then connecting, interfacing with others, that becomes then of primary importance, because, this particular tradition of Buddhism is part of what we call Mahayana Buddhism. And Mahayana Buddhism, the main orientation, really the basis for training your mind, eventually turns out to be compassion. We want to be of benefit to not just ourselves, but those close to us and those close to them and those close to them. And so eventually we think, I want to be a benefit to the world. I want to be a benefit, we say, to living beings. And so if we recognize that my improving myself in the way that we've been discussing is going to connect me to others, well, then I am improving myself so I can be of real benefit to others. And that orientation is meaningful. It's meaningful for you, it's meaningful for others, it's meaningful for our world, and it's kind of hard to beat that.
So very, very well said. Appreciate that, Kadam. For everyone who's listening and interested, what do you think is a good starting point? What do you recommend for people? I know New Kadampa tradition has centers all around the world, right? Is it mostly in North America and Europe at this point?
No, we have centers in Hong Kong, in Singapore, in various places in the East, and also Australia, New Zealand, South Africa.
Amazing.
I mean, it is South America, Latin America, Mexico. So yeah, we have many centers, and also these days we do increasingly have a bit of an online profile. So there's a podcast called Living Clarity, where I'm occasionally on there, and other Kadampa Buddhist teachers. But I would probably recommend this particular book, How to Transform Your Life by Geshe Kelsang Gyato. And this book you can download for free online if you wish, or you could see if you can get a hard copy on Amazon or somewhere as well. But if you're interested, that would be my recommendation for the best book to start with if you were interested in that.
Man, I got so lucky because I literally just picked that one up off the shelf as a starting point, and it was amazing.
Yeah, we would call that karma.
Great. Hopefully that's an indication of things to come. Kadam Morten, this has been a delight to have you on. So great to talk to you. I mean, I get to interact with you a little bit in the foundation program, but very, very thankful and owe you, Geshe Kelsang, all the volunteers, the community at KMC, huge debt of gratitude for, making all the teachings available and continuing the lineage. And I never would have stumbled upon it without that center in Barcelona. So very much appreciative. All the listeners, stay tuned. In the outro, we're going to let you know we're going to give away 10 free paperback copies of that book, How to Transform Life. Certainly helped me and mine. And for other people, you can download it free. We'll leave a link to that. We'll also leave a link to the list of centers around the world where you can find a KMC center, hopefully around you. Kadam, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sam. See you online.
Hey, bosses, we're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. The show will be right back. Think of some brilliant business partners. Ben & Jerry, Procter & Gamble. How about Buffett and Munger? We bring up those guys all the time. And if you're looking for the perfect partner to grow your business, that's going to be you and Shopify. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. So whether you're selling shipping supplies or promoting productivity programs, Shopify helps you sell everywhere. From their all-in-one e-commerce platform to their in-person POS system, wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. In fact, all three of us here at Invest Like a Boss have used Shopify at one point or another. Johnny actually hit me up and he said he used Shopify for his drop shipping business and made over $30,000 a month in sales. He said they're the best, easiest to use platform, and it grew with his needs. So now it's time to start your Shopify story. Sign up for $1 a month when you do a trial period at shopify.com/iLab. Make sure the iLab is all lowercase. Head to shopify.com/iLab now to grow your business no matter what stage you're in. That's shopify.com/ILAB. Sam, great interview. Anytime that you interview someone, I can tell you're excited. I don't know what it is, but you were definitely excited about this one. And you have a little bit of different tone to your voice. And I like it though. When you're excited, when you're genuinely excited for an interview, it comes across on air. So I like that. Thank you to Kadam Morten for coming on. And once again, we have an episode where I'm like, we're not even talking about an investment. What kind of investment podcast is this? But at the same time, it's like, this is very valuable information to keep in mind for investing. Like it's all connected. And I think I don't want to toot our own horn, but I think we're the only investment podcast that brings up other subjects that we could do a whole podcast without talking about one investment. I don't know that there's any other investment podcast out there that does that.
I think 1 in 10 is the good ratio, for an investing podcast. Like as long as it all ties into optimizing happiness, right? So there's what do we need for optimizing happiness, really? I think there's kind of 3 things that people pursue when optimizing happiness. You can go into all types of niches, right? But you have mind, finances,
yep,
and you have body. So like, what do people in the West typically do? What are we going to do with our life? Like, how are we going to become happy? Okay, we can pursue money, reputation, put that all in one basket. 2, we're going to like optimize our body, get our body like good as shape as possible, right?
Try to live forever. Yeah.
Yeah. Call that healthy, healthy body. And then there's money, right? Money, reputation, body, and then there's mind. So there's like those 3 things. But
and a lot of times in our world, I'm going to say that the mind gets pushed last.
Yeah. And there's like family and friends and stuff. But I think in terms of pursuits, what are we spending our time doing? It's like we're going to make money pretty much all day so we can buy things and so we can attract the right partner, so we can build a family. But money, reputation, all that stuff seem to be kind of like the number one. In fact, we have a survey, guys, and we'll share this with our Patreons, of our users that actually, what are you working on? And no surprise, this is an investing podcast. So investing in finance is kind of number one. But, like I said in the intro, actually mind is the most important. It's just what gets neglected the most, at least in Western cultures, right? So Derek, in this episode, we talked a lot about transforming adverse conditions, or let's just say dealing with stressful or challenging conditions. Has there been anything in the last few days that's really like got under your skin, bothered you, annoyed you, or been like difficult to deal with? A person or a situation? There
is one thing, and it's actually investment related, that it's been kind of annoying me. So
was it me?
I think, well, no, you're good so far. It's the first day though, Sam. We got a little time.
Thanks. But, hopefully you're calmer after listening to this episode. You have some tools to deal with.
I don't know that I mentioned this on the public episode because it wasn't official yet, but I've been trying to buy a place forever. Sam, you joke with me all the time. You're not getting a place. Oh, Derek's just looking to get it. I'm like, but it's not my fault, because when you're self-employed, it's so impossible to get a loan. I'm sure there's listeners out there that are self-employed and good luck getting a loan. So I finally found maybe a hack to do it, and it's to build a new build. And it's a large development. And I'm like, in California, oh my God, developments are delayed for years and years and years. I'm like, I'm going to a state where they know how to do things, right? So I go to Nevada in Las Vegas, and I'm like, they'll get stuff done. They can figure things out. This particular project has built one giant tower in 8 months, which is insane. And I'm like, okay, if you did it once, you can do it again, right? Well, I looked at this place 4 months ago, and they haven't even put a shovel in the dirt yet. They just told me it got delayed another month, and maybe starting at the end of September. And we're in August now when we're recording this. And I'm like, I just want to buy a place. And I'm like, every step I do, I'm like, I think I figured it out, and I just can't get in. So now in my head, I'm just going crazy. I'm like, this is never going to get done. Someone's going to have some protests. There's going to be some rare insect that they found that lives there, and they won't build or something. Like, all these scenarios in my head are going on. And yeah, it's been frustrating.
Oh man. How long have you been talking about and trying to do this? Like
a year at least.
I feel like it's been
maybe even longer. Probably like early last year. So yeah, like a year and a half. Because
it's always like, I got outbidded. Oh, my mortgage fell through. Oh, I went to Vegas
usually
and
the
checked
financing.
this place out.
It's usually the financing. They tell you you're all good. You're pre-approved. Let's go. Realtors obviously are like, let's go all the time. And you put an offer in, and then the finance people are like, oh, did we tell you could get a loan? We're just kidding about that. So yeah, it's awful.
and they can go bad. Then you get in the deal, and it can go bad. Like I did one infamously in Thailand, and it was the same situation where like just kept getting delayed 3 months. Finally, I'm like, I call them up, and this is like a big development. It's like 700 units. And like this shady guy, I would call like the customer service line. This like shady guy would pick up. Found out it's the developer. Found out it's some Italian developer that's developing there. And I'm like, why is he answering the like customer support sales?
Yeah, you shouldn't be answering your own phone for a $1 billion building.
Yeah, something is not right here. And yeah, finally they never ended up building it. So I was lucky because I took early action and got most of my deposit back, but a lot of people didn't. The way I finally called BS on it is I asked somebody locally to go drive by and see if what they're saying is true. And they went by, they're like, dude, they haven't even broke ground yet. It's like a forest. I'm like, oh man, gotta do something here. But yeah, these things can plague your mind, right?
That's what made me nervous about this, because I remember you telling me that story, and then I've heard other like nightmare stories, but mostly like out of the US. And I was told, I should research it a little bit more, that Nevada, it has a 100% guarantee as long as ground hasn't been broken yet, you'll get your deposit back whenever you want. Now, they can say all they want, and it doesn't mean that you're going to, but hopefully that made me feel a little better. And the deposit was pretty low. So at the same time, I'm like, I don't even care about that. I really want a place that bad that I'm like, let's just go. Let's go. So I'm running all these scenarios in my head, and it's probably Kadam Morten would probably say like, you need to stop. But
I think you know Kadam Morten pretty well now. Derek, you just need to stop.
Yeah.
Patient acceptance. I think he would say patient acceptance.
Yeah, there's certain things I've grown to have patience for, but there's a lot of things I don't. When I feel like things are out of my control, I'm like, why isn't this being run better? Why isn't this happening? Why isn't that happening? Man. And it just my brain is probably running like 90 miles an hour almost all day. which he would probably say is terrible.
Can we do a case study on you?
Yeah, I hope so. We should. Yeah.
Me too, man. Oh my gosh. The teaching the Lojong it's so applicable to us. It really is. I mean, I'm sure other cultures and other people as well, but man, I find like it's the right balance also of humor, because in the group, like in my group study, we bring up all types of situations just like on a daily basis. And you're just like laughing and nodding your head the whole time. Like, oh my gosh, it's so true, man. Like constantly throughout the day, that voice and the emotions that you deal with, like especially patience, is a very, very difficult one.
I want to bring up one that you mentioned to him on the interview that I was laughing out loud. I was listening in my car. Sam, you said you were on a flight, and obviously everyone's almost everyone's been on a plane, and there's kids running around, babies screaming, crabby people, whatever it is. And you said, you know what, I'm going to take a minute and realize that if all these people weren't here, I wouldn't be able to take this trip. And I was like, okay, that's good insight, right?
Yeah.
And that was a good thought, and I was
very mature,
all into
man.
it.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Until you said you called the flight attendant and asked if you could announce that to everybody.
No.
I was like, oh my God, I can picture Sam on the intercom going, attention all passengers. You should be happy you're here, because we all get to go to Florida or wherever you're going.
I'm sure, Derek, when you're on the spiritual path, you get excited by these breakthroughs, right? And that was a breakthrough for me, because I really don't enjoy flying, especially domestic in the US. And yeah,
but I can just picture you asking to announce it.
Actually, after I said that to Kadam Morten, I'm like, that's kind of one of those things. I'm thinking in my head, like, that's one of those things that, yeah, you have that thought, but you don't really tell a friend about it.
I love it.
You don't go announcing on a podcast. No, I didn't actually ask, but the thought arose in my head that, like, because I look around and everybody is seemingly pretty miserable. Yeah. And I'm like, man, if everyone just had this awareness that I just was able to manifest, everyone would be having a great flight. And it was inspiring. That's a
good point. And I like where your heart's at. I just, the action of you, like, being like, I need to spread the good word.
That would have been ridiculous. People probably would have thrown their plastic cups at me or something.
Or you would have been on TikTok or something. It would definitely.
But no, it is true. I think when you do have like these insights that totally shift your perspective in an otherwise challenging situation, you kind of like want to celebrate it. And that was like my idea of how to celebrate it. But in hindsight, I'm glad I didn't get up and that lady would have thought I'm ridiculous. She would have thought I'm crazy.
She's like, sir, you need to sit down, and you are not having any more drinks on this flight.
We're not serving you. Not even peanuts for you, sir. Right? Well, you don't get peanuts anymore anyways.
Yeah, too many allergies.
Patient acceptance, patient acceptance.
It seemed like the basis of his teachings are like that everyone's self-centered, which, I mean, I live in Los Angeles. Let's be honest. I see that every day. But were you finding that was maybe a lot of your issues? You're like, this isn't all about me. I don't know. I'm just curious.
Well, it's one thing to realize that the issue and pain that you have in life is all around your basically your ego. In Lojong, they call it, or in this tradition, they call it self-cherishing, which basically means like self-centeredness, right? And it's born into all of us. So it's one thing to recognize it, but if you're ever in a state of like true emotional anguish, you can always track it back to your sense of ego and to your sense of self-cherishing. So it's one thing to recognize that, but it's another thing to overcome it. So a lot of the practice is about overcoming it and changing the object of your care and focus, care and compassion to other people instead of always about me. Why am I in this traffic jam? Why is this flight delayed? It's causing me distress. Why did this person say these words to me? Now I'm sensitive about this. And it goes on and on and on, but you can always trace these negative emotions back to your sense of self. So, first thing is recognizing that. And then the second thing, which is much more difficult, is actually how to overcome that. And that takes, it's a long form of practice, but it's definitely a linear practice where you make gains along the way. It's not like you practice for 10 years and then you have a step up. So yeah, I found tremendous benefit in the teachings, and the practice becomes so fun too, man, because, with that right balance of humor and like patient acceptance and light touch, it's like all of a sudden your day becomes so fun and interesting because
I can see that.
It's just filled with practice, right? And all these situations that you catch yourself like getting fussy at the most ridiculous thing. And then you just start like, you catch it and you start laughing. You're like, all right, how can I apply some of the practice? And like the day literally becomes like a game, but at the same time, you're feeling better. You're feeling lighter. You're feeling happier. You're feeling just more peaceful along the way. But it also brings in an element of humor for me anyways.
I also feel like when you're in a city, you have to have these thoughts more often, because I think a lot of these emotions are triggered by other humans, I would think.
Oh yeah, massively, man. Massively. Like there's a whole psychology on that. That's just like all of our problems are interpersonal problems. It's our relationships with other people, how they look at you, but also like the judging mind. When you walk down the street there in LA.
Sam, I live in Venice Beach. What do you think I see every day?
Watch the mind. Every person you look at, you make a judgment on, right? I mean, it's ridiculous. Like if that was actually like on a public loudspeaker, you'd be like, who is this person, man?
I think it's made me less judgy though, because I've seen it all now. At this point, it's like once you have it, if you're new to seeing that kind of stuff, you're like, wow, the thoughts that go through your head. But now I'm like, it takes a lot for me to go, holy cow. But yeah, it's so just because I've seen so much. Yeah. Yes.
Maybe you should recommend this to everybody. Come live a year. Live at least 4 months in Venice Beach.
It's a good human experiment. I will say.
You'll make progress.
Yeah. There is one person I want to bring up though, because I didn't know who he was, and I assume a lot of our audience doesn't either. Can you tell us who Geshe Kelsang is?
Yeah, man. Geshe Kelsang was born in Tibet, and he believed that his purpose in this life and on earth was to spread this tradition to a Western audience, and certainly glad he did. But it's an incredible story. Like KMC is not a small organization. They have over 1,000 branches around the world, which is incredible. And this all started from this very simple Tibetan guy, and he didn't have any money, and he just went out into the world and said, I'm going to spread this tradition. And one by one, they built centers and got the funding all through donations to build these centers. And we'll leave a link in the show notes for anyone who wants to check them out. But I've looked like all over Europe, all over the US, Australia. I think Kadam Morten in the episode mentioned Singapore, Hong Kong. Like there's these locations everywhere. and there's probably a location near you. So, yeah, and this all started in this guy's lifetime. Geshe Kelsang that just was like, hey, I don't, don't. I'm sure he wasn't born with a blueprint of how to do it, but the size and scale and reach that has been accomplished just by his pursuit is truly incredible. And like in all the books you'll see within the tradition are his commentary on top of other ancient texts that are in the tradition. So he makes it very, very easy for a Westerner to understand, these Tibetan texts that were written 1,000 years ago.
Yeah, I'm actually just looking where the one is in Los Angeles by me, and it's literally in Santa Monica, Sam. It's like right next to me, right by the beach, like right by the Santa Monica Pier.
Dude, amazing.
I weirdly like run by this all the time. So maybe I should pop in. Might do it this week.
Dude, that's bizarre. Do it. Please do it. You'll like it. You'll love it. You'll definitely like it. And on top of that, so the books, honestly, it was the first book I think I read. No, I'll say the second book I read. It's actually there's a lot of books within that are available, but it's like a simple book to read, but it's this book and Bhagavad Gita. A lot of people may have heard of Bhagavad Gita. It's like an ancient spiritual text from India. And these were like the first two books that I just went through, and it was literally like every paragraph, I'm underlining 3 or 4 things. They're just so deep, and like it's like mic drop over and over again. You're like, you get hung on these words, and you're like, wow, they just totally has the ability, like one paragraph has the ability to change like your whole life. It'd almost be like enough to chew on for the rest of your life, just like in a single page, That's how all these books are. It's incredible. So that was the first book like I read. And then after I read that, I was just kind of hooked in the teaching, right? And so I've been continuing on ever since. But I want to give this book out to some of our listeners. It's available free for PDF, but not everyone likes to read PDF. Derek, I know you don't. I basically never read online. If a lot of times when
we have authors on, their publicists or whoever maybe will send over a PDF. I'm like, okay, great, cool. I'm gonna read it, and then I'm like 2 pages in, and I'm like, wait, where was I? And then you kind of gotta find the spot. So yeah, a paperback or hardcover or whatever it may be is always the better option, at least for me, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners feel that way too. So Sam is gonna hook you guys up with a book because that's how much he believed it changed his life. So, Sam, why don't you tell us what the book's even called and what they can learn from it besides some great highlighter options?
Well, we talked about what the book contains in the episode, but the book's called How to Transform Your Life. It's deep, sounds deep. It's actually a very simple read, but it's deep. It's like you could read the whole book easily in a day or two, but you could also read the whole book over 2 years. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's like it's easy to read along, but it's also like, and it's not for everybody. I think these books tend to hit people at different times. Just like if you read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, if you read that at a certain point in your life, it'll be the most life-changing book you might ever read. But if you read it at another point in your life, it might just be like, it's nice reading, but it didn't do much for me, right? So, anyways, if you want the book, let's give out 5 free copies. Maybe 10 if we're feeling good. How about 10?
Sure. And like Sam just said, only if you're like ready for this. So if this episode like actually resonated with you, you should email us. You can email me directly and we'll get it sorted out. So it's Derek, DEREK @investlikeaboss.com. I'll put it down in the show notes as well too, but it's just Derek @investlikeaboss.com. Put book in the title or Geshe Kelsang or whatever you want, as long as I know what the email is about. And if you are a Patreon, we'll give you preference to that too. So if I'm kind of deciding between one person or another, the Patreon's going to win out. So sorry, that's just the way it goes.
There you go. And it is available for free download online. So we'll leave a link there. If you don't mind reading online, just take that option. But if you're a paperback bro or gal, totally understand. Just send us an email and we'll send it out to you.
And speaking of Patreon, Sam, as we teased, just got back from a month in the forest. So I need to get all the tea from what happened in there. And I think we're going to release that in Patreon very soon. So if you're not a member of Patreon, you'll get access to exclusive, kind of what I don't know what we call mini episodes. Where we delve a little bit deeper into things. As I mentioned, my Vegas condo, I don't think we talked about that publicly yet. So all that information is in there. Sam is just catching up. He had quite a sizable loss while he was gone. I'll tease that a little bit. And much more. You just got to go to investlikeaboss.com, click become a Patreon. Plan start as low as $5 a month. And in the next month or two, we're going to have another mastermind call too. So look out for that.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that in this episode, but talk about an adverse condition or a challenging situation to come back to after being offline for 30 days. And I come back and have a big loss in one of our investments that should not have gone bad. It's like one of those you put in the safe bucket and you come out and you're just like, oh, that stings so bad. And also, guys, in the episode, you get to see me without any eyebrows, if you can bear that. You get to see Derek with freshly trimmed eyebrows. So we got some fresh looks for you.
Yeah, definitely look forward to that. And we will catch you on the next episode, bosses. See you later.
Thanks for listening to the Invest Like a Boss podcast. Join our mailing list at investlikeaboss.com to get exclusive access to our insider investment portfolios and our private members forum.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends and leave us a review in the iTunes store. It helps more than you know. See you guys next week.